Here to talk about it, Locked On Panthers host Julian Council. Julian, what do you make of this one as these losses keep piling up, and with them, all these mistakes here still in Week 14?
Yeah, it's the same thing every single week, right, Nick? We hear it from Matt Rhule talking about the lack of execution, not being able to stop having penalties and then turnovers. And that's what it really boiled down to on Sunday. The 3 interceptions, or the 2 interceptions in the fumble, one of them from Cam Newton, the fumble, and then PJ Walker coming in as the quarterback carousel continues here in Carolina. It wasn't a benching, but that was a plan, I guess. And it's not seemingly a plan that's working for Carolina with the absence of Sam Darnold and the return of Cam Newton. But turnovers are killing this team, and the catastrophic ones that Matt Rhule brought up on Sunday, like the handoff where Cam Newton got stepped on by center Pat Elflein instead of just trying to hold on to the football, tried to still hand it off, and it didn't work out well for them. And that's just what's held them back. Because you look at the game yesterday, it wasn't like the Panthers played all that terribly. It was a 9-point game or 8-point game. Had they not turned the ball over 3 times, and had they early on in the game been able to get some of those interceptions that they had a chance at, we're probably talking about a different result opposed to the one that we're talking about now, where the Carolina Panthers have dropped their 3rd straight and now are sitting at 5-8. Still only 1 game out of the playoffs, but there's really not much hope that that's going to happen looking at who they play the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, basically the entire NFC at this point has a tiebreaker over them. So let's move on from the playoff talk, Julian. And, players after Sunday's game, let's put it this way. Matt Rhule has lost a lot of the fan base. I'll stop short of saying he's lost this team. A lot of them still praising his process after this game. But 2 questions for you. What is the process? And if we're not seeing the results of it, how is it working?
I don't know what the process is. I think it's hard for anyone outside that building really to define it. We go back to the training camp, the DBO sign, the don't beat ourselves. And we just kind of going back to the last question you asked me about just the issues that they had. And it's the same things we see week in and week out, the lack of execution and the penalties and the turnovers. I think being a smart football team is something obviously he wants. He doesn't question their effort and their physicality. He brought that up on Monday afternoon when he spoke to the media following the loss after getting a chance to review the film. And he doesn't see that as an issue. It's just something's not clicking. I don't know what it is right now. Guys like Robbie Anderson and PJ Walker that had been with him since back at Temple understand what's expected out of them from Matt Rhule. And Robbie even talked about just the learning curve that he had when he first had started being coached by Matt Rhule, and just knows that eventually it does work. And I get there's a lot of frustration from the fan base right now. And just, you hear about the process, and he wants to be process oriented, not really all that concerned about the result. But as long as they do the right thing, eventually the result will come. Well, when is the result going to come? Typically it's coming in his 3rd year. And we see an improvement in year 2. It's going to be hard to look at the season as an improvement, especially if they end up not winning in the final 4 weeks of the season and falling to 5-12. But the defense has gotten better. They've figured out the kicking situation after that was one of the main storylines in training camp and heading into the beginning of the season with Joey Slye and Ryan Santoso. Now with Zane Gonzalez, they've got that figured out. But there's certainly aspects of this team, like the quarterback situation, the offensive line, that are all still concerning. And you've also seen somewhat of a regression from some players like Robbie Anderson this season, where you expected a lot more of him, especially after he signed an extension. So I'm not quite sure what the process is. All I know is right now there's some sort of disconnect between Matt Rhule and the players. And I'm saying all the players, but some guys where things that they talk about all week and they work on and they say that they feel good about in practice just aren't carrying over to Sundays.
All right, let's go from process to path. And let's assume right now, until we talk about it later, that Matt Rhule is going to get that 3rd year. There doesn't seem to be a clear road to franchise quarterback and an improved offensive line outside right tackle Taylor Moton heading into next season. How do they forge that path with what they've got on the table right now?
Yeah, it's difficult to think. I think they got something in Brady Christensen. I know every fan out there wants him to play left tackle. He was great at BYU at left tackle. I also question the competition that he played against last season during a pandemic season, 2020. But when he's gotten the opportunities, he's, been solid for the most part. He's also, not had the greatest of days sometimes out there, but he's still a young player. And ideally, what Matt Rhule wanted to do this season was to allow him to sit back and learn behind some of these veteran pieces that aren't going to be here long term. And it's difficult for the Carolina Panthers to try and build an offensive line when you have journeymen like Cam Irving and Pat Elflein, who have not necessarily been great in their previous stops before. And yes, they offer the versatility, which we've seen has at least helped them out this season with Pat Elflein now moving over to center with Matt Paradis out for the rest of the season. But the way to develop a good offensive line, in most part, is going to be drafting them. And they've drafted 2 last season. They already have a guy in Taylor Moton who you feel good about. Brady Christensen, I imagine, starts next season. And then maybe Deontay Brown, if he gets his weight in check, that can help him be able to play next season. But also, you look at his development this year, going on IR with the knee injury, finally played a snap on Sunday. He has not gotten to the point where I think they would have liked him to be at this year, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily a disappointment. But there was 2 pieces that you can try and build around with Taylor Moton, and then it's trying to identify the other 2, whether it's going to be a rookie in the draft, which, hey, first-round pick would make a lot of sense, or if they can go out there and spend the requisite money it takes to get a good free agent out there. Here in Carolina, it's not that long ago, from like that long removed from seeing Matt Khalil, who the Panthers gave a big contract to seemingly fix the left tackle position, and that did not work out. So drafting and developing is the best chance for the Carolina Panthers to try and build an offensive line. And I get over the last decade, things haven't been great. People got to afford the team a little bit of patience, because it just does not happen in one offseason for a team like Carolina, especially when you're looking at some offensive linemen. You look at what Kansas City did. Those guys were trying to go to a team that's already a proven winner. For Carolina, it's going to be hard to get free agents to come here. They're going to have to try and draft and develop guys and instill them into a culture that Matt Rhule is trying to build here in Carolina, which hopefully will work, but we'll see.
Let's talk about quarterback now, though, because, I mean, the draft class is weak, as we all know. And do you want to put a rookie who's not ready behind this offensive line? And does Matt Rhule want to do that in year 3 when he needs to win and get to the playoffs? The free agent class is very suspect. Russell Wilson said he's only getting traded to the Bears, Denver, and New Orleans, in so many words, right now. How do they acquire, who do they acquire to take them to the next level next year? Can they?
It's hard. You look at it right now. Cam Newton, I know everyone loves him. I love Cam. It's hard to look right now after the last 2 games and think that he's going to be back here as the starting quarterback next year. Maybe he has some sort of role. But if Matt Rhule gets fired, I mean, Cam Newton's probably not going to be back. You look at the rest of the NFL, no one wanted him until Matt Rhule and the Panthers got desperate and re-signed him. So he's probably not back here next season if Matt Rhule's not the head coach. And I don't know whether he's back here, even if Matt Rhule is the head coach. And PJ Walker will be a backup. He's not a high-level backup. That's just who he is. And Sam Darnold, his cap hit of $18.58 million will be here on the Panthers roster. Will he be on the Panthers roster? I don't really know. Russell Wilson make a lot of sense. He's also a guy who's dealt with a lot of crap the last couple of years in Seattle, not being protected. And the Seahawks have not been good this year. Is he trying to come here to Carolina, even if you have a relationship with Scott Fitterer, who comes from an organization that's well known to not do a great job when it comes to building offensive lines? Does he want to take that risk and move down here to Charlotte? Aaron Rodgers, we'll see what his relationship is with the Green Bay Packers. But again, Aaron Rodgers is not going to go to some organization that's not known for winning. That's what's going to make it hard for the Carolina Panthers to try and attract any of these quarterbacks. And that's the thing. Matthew Stafford was in Detroit for over a decade with a losing organization. He wanted no part of Carolina. He wanted to go to LA and try to finally find a way to win football games. And the Carolina Panthers, I just don't think they position themselves to be an organization that's going to attract any of these quarterbacks when you look at the fact the offensive line's a disaster, and at wide receiver, while DJ Moore's still fantastic, you've seen Robbie Anderson regress, and you really haven't found a third wide receiver to emerge so far this season. Christian McCaffrey is great, but he's also a luxury at this point because we don't know what his health status is going to be. I don't know what they're going to do. If you draft a quarterback, it's going to take at least 3 to 4 years for these guys to develop. And does Matt Rhule have 3 to 4 years to sit here and wait? Does David Tepper have the patience to wait 3 to 4 years to hope that the first round quarterback that they draft is the right guy? And I hear that, yes, it's a weak draft class. Well, 2018 was supposed to be a great draft class, and Baker Mayfield might not get a contract. We saw Sam Darnold was a bust in New York, not good here. Josh Rosen's holding a clipboard in Atlanta. Only 2 of those guys, Lamar Jackson, who went last of the 5 quarterbacks, it was the last pick in the first round, and Josh Allen have actually worked out. So who knows? Maybe some of the guys out there like Kenny Pickett or maybe Matt Corral from Ole Miss, Malik Willis from Liberty might actually turn out to be pretty good. So they got options. I just don't know how many of them are realistic. And of course, we could always do the whole song and dance again with Deshaun Watson, but he's still got that legal stuff that he needs to get figured out before Carolina can realistically try and bring him in. It's going to be tough to see what Carolina can do to find a better quarterback situation this upcoming offseason. But really, if you think about it, it might just make the most sense to get a quarterback. But can Matt Rhule, like I asked, afford to wait a couple seasons and allow that guy to develop if he wants to keep his job here in Carolina?
All right, Julian, let's get to it now with Matt Rhule. And if I'm David Tepper, first of all, I have a nicer suit. But also, I look at it 2 ways, I think. And one way is, okay, I got a guy to build a team and a program like he did in 2 stints in college, so I got to give him the 3rd year. The other way is the fans are apathetic. The football's getting worse. If I know now, why run him back next year and fire him 4 games in the next season?
Well, that's what it comes down to, how much faith that David Tepper has in Matt Rhule. I've been in favor of giving him a 3rd year. If you're going to call a guy a program builder at your introductory press conference, then you probably need to give him more than 2 seasons because you're not building anything in just 2 years. And Matt Rhule's track record has shown, like I mentioned before, that 3rd season is where the team really takes off. We will never know if they don't give him the opportunity. I would also understand if David Tepper wants to move on, if they fall apart after a 3-0 start and finish 5-12, because that does not inspire much confidence heading into the upcoming season. Now, changes need to occur this upcoming offseason. We've already seen one with the offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, being ousted. You have to wonder what the future of offensive line coach Pat Meyer will be. Special teams coordinator Chase Blackburn. Those are 2 other coaches that a lot of people have their eyes on, and those units have not necessarily lived up to whatever standard that you would like to be set here in Carolina. I'm not sitting here and thinking that it's time for Matt Rhule to move on. Now, in 4 weeks, it might not really matter if David Tepper might not be patient, and he hasn't necessarily shown the most patience because a part of the reason why they are in this quarterback, I don't even know, just malaise. It's just whatever they got going on. Like the words I want to say, I can't say on television, but it's because David Tepper didn't want to watch Teddy Bridgewater. And you end up with Sam Darnold in a terrible situation and probably the worst quarterback situation in the league. So I would hope that maybe he allows Matt Rhule another offseason, especially now having a general manager in Scott Fitterer, an actual GM here in Carolina, to build this roster and gives him an opportunity in year 3 to kind of go playoffs or else. And we'll see how things go. But I don't think it's really time to move on from Matt Rhule. I think people should practice a little bit more patience and allow the guy to at least get the opportunity in his 3rd year to have that jump that he's typically had at his previous stops of Temple and Baylor.
Julian Council sticking it out with us at always. He could always jump to Locked On Hornets for a better ride, but he's staying right here. Julian, thanks for joining us as always.
Yep, thanks.